of interaction, various niche markets in the media and entertainment sector to try to identify ways for the U.S. and India to develop that corridor. For those of you in Washington, D.C., it's a beautiful, warm summer day here. We encourage you to go outside, of course, and social distance at the end of it. And we know in India, we're looking forward to an early monsoon, which is always a happy time, and we're all looking for that in these very difficult circumstances. Today's webinar particularly is on Indian technology and talent for the creative economy. How does India and the United States work together in the media and entertainment sector? We're really thrilled to be working with our partners, Jet Synthesis, not only on today's webinar, but the overall series. I encourage everybody who has interest going forward to reach out to us with ideas for future activities, engagements, and webinars and such, as we want to kind of drive this forward over the next weeks and months to come. A few nuts and bolts. We are on Microsoft Teams here. Everybody can mute and unmute themselves, but we do ask in the early part of the conversation to mute yourself, and if needed, turn yourself off of video if there are problems there. Please feel free, once you ask a question, to unmute yourself. There's also ability to ask a question in the chat. We will capture that and pass that along. So we are going to begin now in Meta, our very capable moderator, and we're really excited to have you here today. Why don't you kick off and start this for everybody on board?
Thank you, Jay. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Medha. I work for Jet Synthesis. I'm a senior producer there, and I'm currently based in Los Angeles in my home, as is everyone else in Los Angeles, hopefully. I'm going to go about introducing our very, very dynamic speakers. I'm very pleased that we managed to collect this group of people. So let me go ahead and start with the introduction. First off, Jack G, the infamous Jack G. Jack is one of the highest grossing producers in the US box office history, who founded Happy Madison with his college classmate, Adam Sandler, making 30 movies in 20 years, generating about $4 billion in revenue. He's an active investor in various companies and a founder of Your Life and Slice Media, which we'll learn about today. He is a proud father of 2 kids and loves documenting their lives, a big part of the Your Life umbrella company, which is a very fascinating company, and can't wait for all of you to learn more about this company. I will now go on to Abhishek. Raise your hand, Abhishek. There we go. So Abhishek actually did not begin in the media industry early in his career. He actually began out at M&A at Lazard in New York and was a founding member of a $230 million private equity fund, and has spent a large chunk of his career setting up cross-border businesses between the US, Europe, and India. He then met Jack G, which is a really fun story, which we will be talking about shortly. And on the side now, he does amateur stand-up and he edits Wikipedia articles, in case anyone wants to reach out to him for assistance on that front. And he has now co-founded Your Life and Slice Media with Jack G. Moving on to my boss, Rajan Navani. Rajan, you want to raise your hand? There we go. Hi, Rajan. Rajan is the vice chairman and managing director of the Jetline Group of Companies, which is an 81-year-old generational company. But over the last decade, under Rajan's leadership, the group has made a lot of investments in the digital media world. He's doing a lot of very interesting, innovative work in that space, focusing a lot on digital entertainment through his group company. He has operations in India, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Japan, Europe, and the US. In the US, he's located in San Francisco, New York, and LA. And through a combination of Jet Ventures and Jet Labs, he also has set up Garage, which is a group engaging deeply in investing in the startup ecosystem in India, Israel, Singapore, UK, Japan, and the US. Prior to this, Rajan worked at NASA. Yeah, just one of those silly internships. He worked at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland before he joined his family business. He'll now be working very closely with Prime Minister Modi on the vision of New India in 2022, and is a founding trustee of India 75 Foundation, is also the chair of CII's India 75 Council, and a board member of the U.S. India Business Council. He is a member of PM Modi and the Indian government's CEO Forum for Japan, Sweden, and Thailand. And he's doing a lot of interesting work in the app space. He has created an app called 100 MB with the infamous cricket player Sachin Tendulkar, a meditation app or a mindfulness app called thinkrite.me. And we also worked very recently on an app with Adam Levine from Maroon 5, which was a very interesting cross-border exercise, which we will talk about down the line. Namit Malhotra. Namit, would you like to raise your hand? There we go. Namit is a third generation of filmmaking family, and he has very, very interesting history in the filmmaking business. He began out in his garage, in 1995 at the age of 18. Fast forward 11 years later, and Namit is listing Prime Focus, his company, on the National Stock Exchange in India, and soon expanded to the UK and the US. In 2014, Namit acquired a renowned award-winning British visual effects studio, Double Negative, and is now the CEO of the newly rebranded DNEG. He has overseen its expansion from its London base into Vancouver, Los Angeles, Montreal, Mumbai, and various other sites around India. Under Namit's management, the company has expanded both operationally and creatively, and DNEG has won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects 4 times in the last 6 years. So this will be, I'd love to explore as we go along all our respective journeys from Mumbai to the US and to the global stage. So Namit, thank you for joining us today. And last but not least, Ridhima Lula. Extremely excited to have you here. A core entertainment enthusiast with a strong understanding of audiences' choice across content and films, original TV, original content and music across genres. Ridhima Lula spearheads content strategy for the Eros Group. She's previously worked at STX Entertainment and on film projects across the globe. She's now the Chief Content Officer of Eros, and Eros recently announced a very fascinating collaboration with STX that she will be talking about as during this talk. So let me go around and get you all to talk a little bit about since we are in the business of storytelling, why don't we get you all to tell your respective stories, your respective Indo-US story. We'll start off with Jack. Here you go.
Yeah, I think you're on mute, Jack.
Yeah, I was on mute. Do I explain our company first, or how? Yeah.
Your company and how you came across the Indian creative work that you probably wouldn't have come across in your traditional Hollywood background.
Right. So, like Maida said, I was Hollywood producer for about 20 years, made about 30 movies. And then when I left, I wanted to move into more free time with my kids, basically. Free time with the family. The kids were getting older. And I figured movie production just makes you stay on a movie set for 15 hours a day in a different country, probably. So you'll kids. So I made a big decision anyway. But now that I was with my kids all the time, coaching their teams and this and that, I was filming them like everyone does with their iPhone. And I realized there was no good editing solution. The solutions were do it yourself, which is hard if you don't know what you're doing and takes a long time, or let the robot/algorithm put it together for you like Apple and Google do. And the quality was very poor because the artificial intelligence just doesn't understand, what to choose and what order to put it in, whatever. So I would give it to my Hollywood friends, my editors, and say, here's a couple $100, do this over the weekend. and they started putting together these amazing stories of my children's life, almost like movie trailers. So as my friends saw the quality of these memories, they started to say, like, how can I do this? Can you give mine to your editor? You know, like that. And that's when I realized this is a business. If I could take all of yours and give it to my editor, essentially it's a worldwide way to connect the consumer with the editing power of the world and with our creative control in the middle. So to quickly get to the India part, I met Abhi, and I needed some help to build the business. Abhi was a great asset, and he told me about India. And I, at first thinking, honestly, I was like, I don't know if India can understand the culture, if they're as good as the Hollywood people. I don't know. And Abhi said, give it a try. So I did, and I was blown away with the results. The results were amazing. Um, so much so that we started learning that they could even compete at the highest level and be better than some American editors, even in Hollywood. So it was a really eye-opening experience to me, and I was very excited to find this out and to build this company going forward.
Abhi, you want to take it away from there? I mean, how the hell did you meet Jack, and how did this happen?
Thank you for that, and thank you for the kind introduction. I met Jack G in San Francisco through some common friends, a guy called Brendan Connaughton, who's the CEO of a wealth management firm. And he's a friend of mine and a friend of Jack's, and he introduced us, and Jack was giving me his entire sort of vision on building this company that he just described. And my background has been a lot of it has been cross-border U.S. India business. And so I was very familiar with the ecosystem. My brother is a well-known TV personality in India, so I knew the editing landscape in India. And then I had no clue who Jack was, so then I had to Google him, and I'm like, who is this guy? And I'm like, holy shit, he's a legend. So I was just excited that I've finally met somebody from Hollywood. So the next thing I know, he's like, hey, do you want to come to LA and help me build this company? And my whole background has been investment banking, which has got nothing to do with Hollywood. I didn't know anyone in Hollywood. So I show up there and I'm thinking I'm going to get a hotel room. And then he says, no, just take my house for a month. I'm going to be traveling to Africa with my family. And then suddenly I'm staying in a house next to Schwarzenegger's house. And I'm like, holy shit, what is going on? Because I'm a middle-class guy and I've never been exposed to these fancy people. And I realize they're not that fancy. They're like the nicest people ever. So over the course of the next few months, hanging out with Jack, it's like, at his house, it's Jack, the gardener, head of a studio, friend, head of a studio. And so I get overwhelmed and I'm like, okay, I got to get in on this action. And so then I realized that, what can we do together? And, adding to the first part of the consumer business that Jack was speaking about, we had our India team. We built a small team of 10 people, not like Namit's company or Rajan's company. These are massive companies. We're small kids on the block. Maybe we'll make a dent. But anyways, our small team of 10 people are the highest level creatives. And they suddenly pull off the trailer spots for The Joker, for Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, for some of the top movies for big studios. And we worked with some of the creatives who were working on it. And it suddenly seemed that we are able to do this stuff at the highest quality. And we realized that on top of the consumer business, we can make an offshoring business really, but except at the highest level of Hollywood creative. And just to add some background, Jack and Sandler back in the day, they also co-founded a bunch of creative companies. So Jack co-owns one of the largest trailer companies in Hollywood, two of them actually. So he had the knowledge of how to do creative. And so we started training our India team, and now we're working on really cool Hollywood stuff, but we're early stage, we're learning, and that's sort of my story, living a startup life and wanting to live the Hollywood dream, but not quite there. Maybe Jack can get me there.
Rajan, why don't we go over to you, and if you can tell us a little bit about your background and your story, your Indo-US story, because you come from a very prominent family, and you've been doing a lot of work in Asia. And tell us a little bit about your experiences so far.
Thanks, Mira. Firstly, I want to thank Jay and the US IBC, for really putting this together. I think it's been a long time since we've been able to explore the true potential of what India and US can do in the media and entertainment sector. And when I came onto the global board of US IBC, I've been such a strong believer in what can be done cross-border that I thought it's absolutely essential that all of us get together and find ways in which we can truly make the most of this phenomenal opportunity that lies ahead of us. And I think the journey for me, both for the Indo-US as well as this entire sector, actually started more out of a capital allocation discussion that we were having when we realized that just investing in land, building machinery, making products, and trying to force sell them to people was a way of the past. And over a decade ago, we said, you know what, we need to stay connected with the consumers. And I must say, it was by default, working with McKinsey and a few others, that we realized that the best way to see where the consumer is moving and to have access and engagement with digital consumers around the world, or the consumers around the world, was to be a part of the digital media and entertainment industry. And that's really how we got interested in this space. We started looking at this very closely. And through a very large vision of wanting to play a key role in the daily digital life of people, we got into entertainment, gaming, music, video, and all the different kinds of aspects that we are doing right now, both in India and the US. And I must say that the U.S. India bridge, is something which, as I said, I believe, even from an opportunity perspective now, looking at what has happened, in the lockdown, seeing what is the potential of Indian talent, and given that, there is this kind of a gap where everybody wants to look inwards. I think there is, as countries, the opportunity to do a lot more with people being where they are, and driving investments in the right areas could make a meaningful difference. But my story with the US then also extended to us creating a gaming studio in LA. We actually, a few of our crazy partnerships got us to do music videos in LA with singers who couldn't access India, and created some very crazy, unique opportunities. And Meda and a few others have actually been able to bridge the Mumbai and LA, the Hollywood, Bollywood gap really well for many of our opportunities. And I'm really excited as to where this can go. Our strong areas now is to really look at co-producing across the world, especially with the US, kind of trying to leverage the best of Indian talent and our knowledge of the Indian consumer, and now increasingly the global consumer, and see how we can continue to do more in this space. So I'm going to stop here, but we'll come back as we talk more through the evening.
Fantastic. Namit, you have an amazing story from your garage to, as you put it, world sourcing. So if you want to give us the 3-minute spiel on that journey, that massive journey, go ahead.
Well, thanks, and great to be here. I think, for me, talking about the subject we're on actually has been literally the road I took many years ago in really trying to forge this bridge between the West and the East in this industry. As you kind of kindly put in my introduction, I'm sort of third generation in the film business, coming out of Bollywood. My grandfather was a cinematographer who shot the first color film in India in the 1950s. And here I was, an 18-year-old kid, setting up technology in 1995, offering editing services to television and the advertising and the film business in India. You kind of get past the Y2K phase in India. You see all the massive growth the Indian IT companies have had, and working with the US and all the big Fortune 500 companies collaborating together. And for me, it sort of seemed like an odd fact that here I talk about my legacy of being in the film business, where the only reason I talk about my grandfather is that, you've got him collaborating with the cinematographer of Gone with the Wind in bringing color film to India 60 years ago in the 1950s, way before computers, way before we had any real technological connection with the West. And, you fast forward 60 years later in an industry that India has successfully built itself up on the film side for over 100 years. And there wasn't really much flowing between the two sides. And while every Indian filmmaker was aspirationally motivated by Hollywood, from a Hollywood standpoint, India was obviously a marketplace that didn't really offer much in terms of the box office or an opportunity, because the Indian content industry kind of served that gap. And that's where I sort of began my journey in seeing how I could leverage our technical and creative skills in India and try and build a bridge with the West. The word outsourcing in the creative industry is frowned upon, because no creative filmmaker or a storyteller ever wants to believe that they're going to, somehow devalue the capability of their vision by finding cheaper solutions while delivering greater value in return. So where they always have greater ambition and greater aspiration, and if we could find a way to work together between the two sides of the world, I think we would have something rather special, where you're connecting two of the world's oldest and most prolific film industries or content industries in today's world. And technology is at the forefront of enabling that change. And in every other sector in America where you've had significant collaboration and success with India, whether it's in financial services, in technology, in all kinds of other healthcare and other initiatives, it felt like an industry where we have had deep history that we were sort of really lacking. And that's what got me on this journey and aspiration to try and navigate into the West. I moved to LA in 2010, lived there, and LA was home for me for 5 years. And since 2015, I'm now based in the UK, but obviously travel between the US and India to have a more sane lifestyle, to be able to manage the madness of Hollywood and Bollywood while keeping myself sane. So that's my little story, and excited to be here.
Thank you. And to the person who's on the forefront of the Bollywood and Hollywood dynamics, Ridhima Lula, please tell us your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. And it's an honor to be able to share a little bit about what we're doing with all of you. So I would say movies and storytelling sort of runs in the blood, so to say. My family has sort of been in the industry for generations, and it's only sort of fitting that it's something that I'm super passionate about, and it's such a big part of my heart and soul. So I've obviously been born and raised in the West, and of course, I come from a large Indian heritage. So I set out to move to LA after I actually graduated college. And my first job was at STX Entertainment. I was one of the first 10 employees there. They were in an extreme startup phase. So it was really exciting for me to sort of see how a studio, an independent studio, is homegrown from the top to the top. After that, I then joined the family business. I joined U.S, and I was lucky enough to sort of be a part of supporting exciting new filmmakers, trying to bring really cool content to the forefront of our studio and, of course, our digital platform. I think U.S is a company that has given me so much in terms of what we want to sort of create and put out there in the world. We're a company that's embraced a lot of firsts. We're the first vertically integrated film studio in India. We're the first studio to take Indian films internationally to distribute them across the world. We were the first Indian film studio to list on the New York Stock Exchange. So I think that the Indo-US story sort of fits really well with what we're trying to say, and it's all come around full circle since we just recently announced a merger with STX Entertainment. So for me, my career sort of started there, and now it's all coming together with both companies that I've worked for. So it's super exciting to sort of be on the forefront of trying to create some fantastic content that is on a global platform.
Amazing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you guys some general questions and eventually encourage more of a sort of roundtable discussion, and towards the end include questions from the audience that are slowly and steadily trickling in. So Jack, I'll just begin with you. What were your first impressions when you were working with, a team in India, and how did they surprise you? I mean, how did the cultural sensibilities work out? What was it like to train these people and really have a cohesive company working with on two sides of the world? Jack, I think you're on mute again.
Unmute.
As we see a picture.
I'm on the pic. This is a picture of me and the founder of STX. That's me and Bob Simons on the set of Billy Madison back in the day. It's a Polaroid. And the other thing I want to just say for everyone is, we all agree on this, right? Let me see.
Almost see it.
What does it say?
Namit looks like a movie star.
Very, very. So when he said he had a Bollywood, I thought his family
visual effects I can understand.
Was his family acting, I guess, an acting background. So the question you asked me, yes. Well, obviously with globalization of social media and even the Netflixes of the world, I think the cultures, while they have their individual parts, are becoming more and more similar. I noticed this when I was in China, that a lot of the youth in China, because I've never been to India, were definitely following Western culture and Hollywood culture a lot more than I thought when I went shopping, when I met people. So I think the hard part of storytelling is to, the basic part of storytelling is to have that common cultural background that we're on the same page. And I think that's the gap that I thought was bigger than it was. There's a few people over there that Abhi introduced me to that were like very on top of, everything. And so that therefore, when we started giving them some really, cool editing to do, and they would surprise me. And throughout my career, I was always happy if someone surprised me with doing more than I thought they could do. And that's what happened a few times. And I said, why don't we give them a chance at the highest level? I know a few of my old friends at the studios, and I went to talk to them, and they were like, I don't know, I'm not sure, but if you're doing it and you vouch for it, let's try it. But okay, I think it's good to have a trusted face to interface with the Hollywood people, because there's also a piracy issue if you let anything go outside the studio gates. And I was telling them, what's the difference if it's in, San Diego or India? It's still outside the gates. That's a different topic, of course. But yeah, I was very, very excited to share my storytelling background with the Indian team, and they pick up on it very quickly. And it's kind of an ongoing process to put what I've learned in Hollywood and mix it with, their Bollywood skills.
Abhi, how did you present India as a creative services option to Jack, or actually the other studio folk you've met through Jack? I mean, what was the pitch, or what is it that you got them to, even consider this as an option?
That's a good question. There are a couple of macroeconomic phenomena which are going on in Hollywood now, and that need to be factored in. One is that the traditional creative marketing business, which is trailers, spots, posters, cinemagraphs, all this kind of stuff, has been a relatively low margin business from a theatrical marketing standpoint. We're talking about this is where my investment banking nerdiness gets into Hollywood, but it's been a 15 to 20% margin business, and most of these companies have been happy to be in that space and not thinking of going elsewhere. Now with this crisis and with overheads rising and payroll, I mean, people are actually looking at making cost decisions and seeing if they can lower costs in a more aggressive manner than before. What is unique about our situation is we are not doing VFX or the stuff where Namit and even Rajan have built massive companies on. We're doing tier one creative. Now, tier one creative is actually working on, let's say, the Joker. Now, the interesting thing out there is there are a group of, let's call them, relatively Americanized Indians living in India who have the cultural sensibility to appreciate anything about Hollywood culture. Like, for example, our India creative head knows every player in the San Francisco 49ers, so much so that Jack bought him tickets to the Super Bowl. And when he came for his training session here, he has the ability to choose a soundtrack for which cuts through generations. Now, that's not just one person. There are many other people like that. And this is sort of an overlooked micro set of the offshoring, this is a terrible word, I get it, phenomena, that you can find the highest level creatives that if they were here in Los Angeles, they could potentially work for Sony Studios, or they could work for Warner Brothers, or maybe for Rhythma's company. So that's what I find to be the unique part of our story in terms of what we are creating. I hope that answers the question somewhat, kind of, maybe.
Yeah.
And by the way, just to throw in a quick thing, Rhythma, your story is just awesome. You started off at SPX. I didn't know that. I understand the Eros background, and then this marriage is just super awesome.
Thank
Anyways.
you.
Comes full circle. Yeah. Rajan, so in the app world, I think the Indians have a very strong presence in San Francisco and in tech. We're known for that. We're not as well known for our creative work, especially in artistry and whatnot. So how have you managed to pitch your creative team to folks in the US, and how do you think that since you do a lot of work with governments, how do you think that governments can help to enhance that system and to help allow for more creative work to go through you?
Thanks, Mira. That's a long question. I'll build on it, on both the parts that you said. I think, like what you rightly said, India, has got tremendous credibility for talent and technology. And, when we were building Jet Synthesis, we said that, as I mentioned, if it was to give the best consumer experience to someone in the entertainment world, we realized that it needed to be the right mix of content and technology. Because many a times, it's the content that strikes the person and gets them, excited about but also the technology that not only delivers that, but delivers the right content to the right person. So a lot of AI and a lot of other things. And I think the DNA that we built kind of, has enabled us to be able to create products for India and for other markets with a differentiated DNA. And I think that's what we've used to pitch, to companies around the world, where when we talk of how do we really do something together, our approach is very strongly one of collaboration and partnership. And I think that's where we begin, right? So we don't pitch ourselves as a services company or anything of that sort, because while there is an opportunity to for a partner to use outsourcing as a great means of partnership, I think ultimate success really lies in creating that win-win product. So our approach has always been that how do we partner with you? How do we work together, not only to enhance the business that you work with, but also take those opportunities global. And I must say that while initially we used to get a lot of traction on the technology side, in last few years we've seen a lot of work which we are doing coming around the creative content creation side, right from conceptualization to ideation to visualization to kind of creating sound, music, many other things that earlier I think were kind of missing in India. And I'll tell you what, at least when global companies looked at India, they felt that was there was a gap. But today when we see original great content being created in India, for the masses, for digital platforms, which connect young people around the world together. I think the sensibilities are building up, and our key, opportunity to kind of bring that together is to global teams. And like what we are doing today is a norm now, going forward. So we actually have collaborations where teams work around the table over projects. So I think the opportunity has been one with partnership and trying to see how that can enhance the scope of creative work. Coming to your point on governments, I think again, India pitching itself as a very strong frugal innovation hub. I mean, which is very clear. You're driving price and performance. And when we pitch also to some of our companies, when we talk of co-productions, whatever those budgets are, you can get a lot of the work done in 50% of that, so you can double up on what you're trying to do, or just do a lot more. So I think the role of governments is really to see how we can enhance this process where great Indian talent at a lower cost can work with again the US and technology, and actually build that as something that we can do not only between our two countries, but also for the world. And in India, particularly, I've seen that we need to really form a lot of these areas as industries. So for gaming, for example, I'm now the president of the Indian Digital Gaming Society. We got the Confederation of Indian Industries to actually champion this and say, hey, we'll create several 100,000 jobs over the next 3 years in India that can become a part of a global ecosystem that can support gaming. Talking in terms of the role that governments will need to play will be one of facilitation. I think one where you create an environment that can enhance the partnership between companies on both sides, and talk a lot more about the successes. Also address things that have not worked, and see through over a period of time that. And I see a lot of interest even in the US. We do things on the US side, and we are seeing that there is an understanding, at least on the opportunity that can exist between the two countries, because services has clearly dominated the large part of the US relationship in technology in any case. And I think taking that into the creative space will only make that something that can be better for both of our countries. So yeah, interesting times. And I think while there's been a lot of pain associated with COVID around the world, in many of the areas that we're seeing a lot of interest in our mindfulness platforms, in our gaming platforms, in our esports venture, because when there's no live sport, there's a lot of sport happening electronically, education, gamification in that when colleges are spent. So it's not just about sending out information, but really create new information. So, yeah, I think there is an exciting opportunity on the digital side. Is how we capitalize on it over a period of time.
I think you brought up a really interesting point, which is the use of semantics, the changing use of semantics in terms of our cross-cultural entertainment industries, that we're not just being services, we're being partners. A couple other words that you say, in terms of looking at gaming as an industry. And I think that's something that we should keep in mind as we try and promote this cross-cultural corridor. So good point there. And actually, talking about semantics, Namit, you have a term that you use called world sourcing. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means in the context of what you've developed and your experience?
Yes, I think this obviously came through the journey, as I explained earlier, when I moved into acquiring businesses in the US in late 2007, right before the what I don't know if people remember, but it was the writer's strike, the actor's strike, and then the Lehman crisis that sort of had a perfect avalanche playing out that caused havoc in the world back in the 2020 pandemic. That was the last one that I remember. And, I obviously went literally from an India to a US standpoint to try and build that bridge, only to realize that post the way the industry had kind of played out, we invested heavily in buildings and in companies in LA and New York. And what I started to hear back from the studios was, rather than look for companies that would produce locally in LA, they actually were looking for alternatives for production to be based out of the UK or Canada or Australia, where they were getting these massive tax incentives that were being provided to the American studios. And that was sort of a first time revelation to me as sort of the outside guy coming into America, that not only had I invested in a 60,000 square foot building with over 300 employees in LA, to be told very quickly to turn around and go back out and set up studios in Vancouver and London, and then start to sort of calibrate that offer to the studios. And that sort of, from being this, suddenly it became that you're not just a U.S. India business. You have to kind of pick the best the world has to offer. In a digital enabled world, you got to be able to pick places in the world that are actually truly capable of providing certain specific tool sets and capabilities. And the ability to, put that together seamlessly for the end objective of the studios, creatively and financially, became the objective. And that's how we moved from that construct of outsourcing to saying we are world sourcing the best for what is needed. And therefore we set up studios in London and Canada and India, and kind of integrated all of them seamlessly using one technology infrastructure, so that you could share work and share the ability to truly collaborate with our clients in LA or wherever the filmmakers chose to stay. And that, I felt was obviously very complicated right at the beginning, but you sort of see the benefits of that in building that's truly sustainable, because now you've got what I would call a global workflow that is able to now work almost across the board on every project that we've got, whether it's won an Oscar or not. We can almost certainly say that work now happens across all our sites, and it was necessitated through that period in 2008 and 9, and through the pandemic has certainly held strong in being able to really continue to deliver what I would call cutting edge work by leveraging the best the world has to offer. And that's why it feels a lot more that we're not just a one-way traffic. It's actually you're bringing projects into that what I would call a world sourcing pipeline. We're bringing, I'm producing a couple of very large-scale Bollywood projects that are benefiting now out of the technology and the creative skill sets in the West. At the same time, we're talking to our clients on the Western forefront to see how we can leverage our volume and scale capabilities in India and truly make them, sort of jive in a very, very cohesive manner. And that, I think, sort of at the hallmark of our value proposition and delivery capabilities that are really differentiating us from, let's say, our competitive landscape, and result at the absolute top end of the game. So every filmmaker and studio at this point recognizes that they're getting the best the world has to offer by truly being able to collaborate it.
Yeah, and I think both you and Rajan have brought up some interesting points in terms of also just storytelling. Ridhima, when I've worked in this industry for about 10 or 15 years in both countries, and I remember going back to India and teaching people, oh, this is how it's done in the West, right? This is how story structure works. This is what final draft is like. And it was always like someone was teaching and someone was learning. And it didn't really feel like an even playing field initially, because we come from a culture of very rich storytelling. So I know, for instance, with your merger, you might be adapting a lot of Hollywood films for the Bollywood market, but how do we enhance natural and this rich history, as I've just mentioned, of storytelling in India? How do we get writers from India to really step up and be, work on global platforms? Sorry, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Uh-oh. We might have to get you to sign in and sign out again, if that's fine. But I'm going to hold. Oh.
While we wait for Ridhima, I just felt I want to make a point based on what everybody else was talking about. I think the part that I feel that's truly been a challenge is obviously this dynamic of cultural, difference between the West and let's say, I would say more Hollywood, because kind of everybody else has graduated or transitioned their workflows and processes to follow the American system for the most part, because the American studio or the film production or content production mindset is to create something that's globally consumed. It's not just America's not making product for America; it's making it for the world. So it automatically encapsulates a very different paradigm of thinking and planning that goes into that space. Whereas India, on the other hand, I don't think we have what I would even call a pan-Indian construct. What works in Bollywood doesn't work in the south of India, and vice versa. And that's sort of where, while we've made a lot of content and have our own ways of doing it and doing it very well and efficiently, it's very different to what you've seen in the West. And that's not easy to make people recognize, like you said, that how do you really help people understand that if we can't see eye to eye on a structure and a methodology of how to work, regardless of the talent, you won't be able to really join the dots, because we'll be planes flying past each other in the air, and that's not necessarily the outcome we all want. And that's sort of been one of the hardest learnings, even for me as an entrepreneur or as a business, is to really understand the intricacies of cultural connect between how, when somebody asks you for a schedule or a structure of delivery, what does that mean in Bollywood versus what does that mean in Hollywood? And I have, we've obviously had to learn that and appreciate the sensitivities around that, and why people are so specific about those things, and why India can continue to can sort of operate in its own paradigm, which works within India, but in a global construct may or may not translate. And that's sort of what I feel, at least in my case, I had to learn it the hard way, and which is sort of, you can't do it over and over again, and appreciate why people get so lose confidence so quickly if something that was supposed to come in the morning comes in the afternoon, or if you have 2 more iterations to get there. What is it that causes so much angst and discomfort? And that's something that there is no real prescribed book or a process that lays it out for you. And especially in a creative business, those are things that you have to just perfect and understand very, very carefully. And I think every business is going through that learning curve. And I think that's been one of the biggest challenges of really driving this collaboration seamlessly.
Yeah. Ridhima, what are your plans on this front?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. I think to answer your question earlier, how do you sort of support Indian creators to sort of tell global stories? I think good producers would be the first straight-jacketed answer to that. I think we're at a place now where I think every piece of content, to be honest, is a global piece of content. We can't really look at something and say, oh, this is an Indian language piece of content, this is a Korean language. I think what's so fascinating about stories and storytelling is that it gives people like a voice when they can't find the voice to speak, right? It's the emotion that connects with people. So I think that's a place where we're sitting at. And I think what sort of takes storytelling more global and to the next level is sort of how you come up with sort of interesting partnerships, such as technological partnerships or sort of creative collaborations. So a couple of things we've sort of, taken a step back and looked into and taken challenges in our stride is, during COVID, how do you create content? I think the world had sort of stopped, but we managed to sort of create, collaborate, and execute 2 series completely shot in people's roofs and connect those stories when someone is sitting in LA, someone is sitting in Bombay. There's those like sort of dynamics that you have to deal with. So that was a challenge, and I think we took it in our stride and were able to sort of deliver. The technology partnerships are really, really important. I think right now that's more inherent in what we're doing than ever. We recently announced a strategic collaboration with Epic Games, the creators of Fortnite, and how we're going to be using the Unreal pipeline to create a lot of our content, whether it's movies or series. So I think that the challenge there isn't really a challenge of like where, what, who. It's about sort of getting a good team in place and really just focused on delivering a fantastic product. And, you sort of are able to overcome those challenges and get that out there. And sorry, I missed a lot of your question because I got logged out.
Well, you should definitely talk to Rajan at some point about the gaming stuff. That's very exciting.
Yeah,
Jay,
really cool
I'm sorry.
stuff. Yeah. No, he mentioned some really cool stuff earlier, and I think you brought up some fantastic points, which is about like gamification of content, whether it's like AR, VR, or personalization of stories, making sure that there's one person in charge of the narrative. I think there's a lot of cool things that can be done there.
Yeah, no, it throws up tremendous opportunities, right, from here on. And I think the good part is, you can do some small experiments and really see the impact it has. And I think that's just so super exciting. And, you create teams that can go about like what, you just look at Jack and you're thinking that, he's about to say something fun and he's looking like coming back to the screen. We get all our people trying so many different crazy things nowadays. And it's a lot of fun to see how some of that stuff can just become and scale, significantly in the future. But you're right, there are tremendous ways to do it.
Jay, I think you have a couple questions
Great.
from our digital audience.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Just a quick sound check. Everyone can hear me yet?
Yeah.
Great. Our first question is from Dave Veer, who is the CEO and founder of S2 Tech. Dave, I actually think you might be the newest US IBC member. It won't last long, but Dave's been with us for only a few weeks now, and we're happy to have him. Dave, you have a couple of questions. Please feel free. The microphone's yours.
Sure. Thank you, Jay. I have a question about the culture in India. When I was growing up, my parents encouraged me to go to engineering. So that's where I became an engineer, and then I came here as a software engineer. And today, the culture hasn't changed much. I see quite a few parents encouraging them to go to either engineering or medicine. So what are your thoughts in terms of creating the awareness of the huge potential of opportunities that are available in media and entertainment?
Can I take that?
Yeah, actually, Jack, I know you had some interesting points you made to me recently about this subject. So, Abhi, go ahead.
Well, it's a very valid point, but I'm Bengali and we are creatives and academics. So there was never any conversation about going into medicine or engineering. Having said that, I did go into finance, so I'm a hypocrite. But now I'm trying to become a creative, like my mom, who's a writer and a singer. So there are parts of India which are less inclined towards going to IIT Kharagpur and doing engineering and joining NASA, like Rajan, though he's gotten back into the creative game. So that's my quick Indian cultural tidbit on that. And Jack.
Yeah, Jack, I think one of the things we were talking about recently was the fact that there are all these kids now going to film school that even in the US, they wouldn't go to, 20 years ago. And there's so many people who have the ability to edit. Can you elaborate on that and your experience with Indian talent on this front?
Yes, it's when I started Hollywood, film schools were very, very few and far between. It's kind of a new idea, like what's film school? That's a job, In fact, I even said that to Adam in college. I met Adam Sandler in college. I was like, that's a major? You can major in that, and because I was in business school also. So over the years, it's become kind of a sexy, fun major. It's much more fun than chemistry or all that kind of thing. And I think the more they see the spread of content without the gatekeepers, right? So now anyone can make content and put it on YouTube and beyond, right? So they think, okay, film school is a way I can learn to do that. It's a job, it's a career, and I don't just have to choose between being a doctor and a lawyer anymore. So, I think we've seen an explosion of film schools to about 200 worldwide from what was probably 5 or 10, 20 years ago. Enormous amount of creative skill out there that our goal for the consumer company is to harness all that. We want to harness the creative ability and do what basically what Prime Focus is doing for the Hollywood industry and Bollywood, we want to do that for the consumer, right? If we can match up the consumer on one side with all the creative talent coming out of film schools on the other side with our brand of storytelling in the middle, we think that's a big vision to really help everyone. It helps humans have jobs in their field of study from film school. It fights back in the battle of human versus AI, because everyone thinks AI is taking over for humans. I think this is one area that humans will have a lead for a long, long time. And I think for the consumer, everyone, since this is a film audience, you can understand, everyone knows what pre-production and production are. So production, you're filming all day with a camera. Okay, guess what? Everyone can now film all day with a camera. The big disconnect is there is no post-production. Okay, so let's go back to the Prime Focus idea. There's no post-production for consumer, right? And if we can democratize post-production, we can turn everyone into a storyteller, and they can have little chapters of a digital museum of their life.
Just to add to what Jack is saying real quick, the funny thing and the irony in your question, Dave, was why aren't people becoming lawyers? Well, Jack did his undergrad in finance and then his JD from Fordham, so he is a lawyer, and then somehow ended up making Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison and Waterboy. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. We can change track.
So that's where I was coming to is so film school is a very good idea. And then this Los Angeles, for some reason, it attracts the creative talent. What is the magic of Los Angeles?
Well,
How can we replicate that in Indian city?
we are kind of starting to at Whistling Woods, and there are a lot of actually mass communication and film schools growing in India. And actually, to take your question into more of an employment angle, Rajan, Namit, and Ridhima, when you're hiring in India, do you now hire from the IIMs? Do you hire from the engineering schools? Because I noticed that on my first few years working in India, and then I realized that there was this whole talent pool of people to address what you're asking. They were graduates from these mass communication schools. And so for the three of you, in terms of your hiring practice of creative talent in India, what do you look for in resumes? Are you looking for people who possibly have that in their background? And therefore, can you encourage that ecosystem?
I would say definitely that and more. I mean, I don't think it needs to be like a specific background per se. We say, for example, we have a writer's room with a bunch of young, pretty cool kids, and they're all from really different backgrounds, whether it's from Whistling Woods or whether it's from one of these IITs, or some of them actually have no experience whatsoever, but just want to tell fantastic stories. So I think that obviously the education aspect of it really does help if you're nurtured in that background, but I wouldn't say that's a deterrent. I think you just have to be extremely passionate and focused and ambitious, and that's what it really takes to sort of survive in this industry. But of course, there's so many fantastic schools in India that really have nurtured really, really fantastic people for us to be a part of our organization as well.
Yeah. Rajan, Namit, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think for the level of scale that we've had to build up, for almost 6,000-7,000 people in India that are currently employed with us, I think a lot of it, obviously, art backgrounds have been probably helpful for a large part, but this has been a lot of on-the-job training that has had to have happened on. Frankly, on capabilities and skills, because what we do is, while it's creative and artistic in nature, it also comes with a very high level of technological sophistication. There's a lot of, people have to be really adept to technical skills as well. And that is another whole piece of the, puzzle that doesn't necessarily have enough relevant experience for that, from that standpoint. So we actually have our own internal training modules and training, even for the experienced people that we bring in, we have to pursue a very active in-house training, understanding of how to bring people up from a certain level that they may be at to a level that they can start delivering at that global standard, which is a minimum expectation. And that's a lot of time and investment, frankly, that's gone into getting.
Adding to what Namit just said, something interesting that we've done is, Jack's founding partner at one of the trailer companies that he invested and co-founded traveled with me to India. We went to the Satyajit Ray Film and Television Academy in Calcutta, where he spoke. I mean, this is literally the core of U.S. IBC. This is Hollywood guys who worked on The Sopranos, made trailers for Pirates of the Caribbean, Jumanji, going straight to Calcutta and working with guys there. And that for me was awesome. And then Jack flies down the India team to Hollywood and just trains them personally, and has his editors and producers train them. So this is the crux of very high level creative training, which is different from, like Namit mentioned an interesting thing, scaling. I mean, Namit's built a company on using technology, VFX, rotoscoping. What we are talking about is slightly on the softer side of the creative chain, which we are trying to do more and more of. And of course, our business is divided into the Hollywood, offshore Hollywood, I won't call it offshoring, trailers and spots, etc., and the consumer side that Jack was discussing, which is taking the images and videos from your phone and editing and curating that into something which is palatable.
Yeah, so for me, this is I would love everyone's advice and have an ongoing dialogue with this council. I think it's a great idea. I think when you look at what Namit just said about 6,000 to 7,000 people in India, we are going, since we have a wider audience with the consumer side, we're going to go 100 times that. And can we build 600 to 700,000 people in India that work for our consumer company? So, it's a big vision for sure. I think we can do it. The numbers are there, and this is not tomorrow, right? This is over time. But it's exciting to have the support of everyone here, and knowing that we want to get these ties going between the countries. And I think this will be the single biggest scale success story by number of people, because we're really going for that big number.
And Rajan, a little last bit on this topic. Rajan, since you're very heavily into gaming, now you can major in game design at NYU. It's becoming a major. It's becoming an official training, university topic sort of thing. So how do you find in terms the talent pool that you're sort of picking up? Are they from art schools? And how can we develop this culture that we've all been talking about?
It's very interesting, Mira, you brought up gaming, right? Because that's one place where the engineer and the art guys really work closely together. Of course, every other creative space. And both are very important. And I still remember, when we looked at what we are paying engineers and what we are paying our creative people, right? And most parents used to tell their kids, to the earlier question that they asked, go become an engineer, you'll get a great livelihood. We find a lot of our creative talent is a lot more in demand. They are the kind of people who we cannot do without, in many cases. And I think today the thing is completely changed. And I know that they have these conversations, going where their parents did not allow them, to study what they wanted to study. Many of them have not studied anything actually initially. They've just been playing games. They started creating games. They had the entrepreneurial skill and learn things on the fly. I think one of the reasons why I believe the India-US partnership can scale, like what Jack was saying, beyond what it is because I think adapting to new technologies, adopting new technologies, learning things quickly is what is there in our DNA in India. It's the jugaad system we talk of, right? People find some way to kind of get ahead, to learn more, to do something that is, a little notch higher. And I think that energy comes with youth, right? It comes with young people Like in gaming, average age of people is in their 20s, and they create some great stuff, right? And we are seeing this thing around the world. The other aspect that I think has kind of worked is like, as we work with countries around the world, take for example in Japan, right? Whether it's the animation sensitivities or the gacha system of gaming, how you really get core loops that people continue to engage and play in, are things that India has been able to pick up, right? And now we're able to adopt or adapt a lot of these principles into gaming things around the world. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity when you put creative, you put technology, you put design and all of that together. And as has been discussed, today the world does not limit you to hire great talent anywhere that it exists, but the scale and the size, I think, even going ahead in the future will come from India. So that's where I think we're heading, and I think this conversation also seems to be endorsing that.
Do you guys, I mean, just to reiterate Jack's question, Namit, Rajan, for both of you, where do you think the potential for scale lies in terms of basic editorial function as we move towards a more technological sort of platform community where everyone has a laptop and can edit? Where do you think, I mean, you've built a company with 8,000 people, but if one were to look at scaling even more, not necessarily under one roof, because that has logistical issues, where do you think the numbers lie in terms of basic creative editing talent in India or elsewhere?
It could also be work from home, so it's doesn't have to all be under one roof.
Yeah.
I think we all work from home even in the current paradigm. So I think that's certainly been made possible. I think editing as a function specifically, I can certainly, imagine a scenario that capability does exist. And because you do have the application of the function of editing across television, across film, across, all mediums, that anything that touches content has an editorial function attached to it. And again, it's all about, more than just training people up, because, editing again is more, it's less about putting a bunch of shots together. It's actually having the sensibility of the storytelling that you want to achieve. And that is a little bit about either creating certain templates, certain structure of technology support that actually can enable that. And that, I think, you do have the benefit of latching onto talent that I would call pan-India. Like, just in our case also, we don't have concentration in any one part of this country. We've got locations in Chandigarh, we've got locations in Calcutta, we've got Hyderabad, Chennai, Bangalore, and Mumbai, of course. So we've had to diversify even in the skill set that we currently look for, which is a lot thinner in the ecosystem. I think that editorial talent you will be able to get on the back of the cloud, workflows that are available, and frankly, the talent that is already there. I think it's just multiplying that on the back of a certain skill set where you can use specifics of what you want and try and create more of that. We do have a sister company which we didn't talk about here, but it's called Prime Focus Technologies, which kind of delivers a similar function. We do about 1,000 promos a month for the network of Star TV in India, and that's sort of a function of editorial and a lot of our technology, AI, and other tools that we've been able to use to try and create those formulated that there is a certain method to the madness, as they say. You can break it down to a certain flow of how things can be laid out, and then you can make it scalable on the back of that. So I believe that the talent is there. It's more about how you can define the parameters in which you'd like to see that play out. And I think that and the teams there and the talent there certainly can deliver to that spec.
Well, and just to add to what Namit said, I think the technology platforms, Abhi, now are of course changing, and they will continue to change. And I think the guys who are able to do that, not while they require the sensibilities, we find that they need to just be able to adapt to new tools and exploit the technology better, right? To be able to create certain kinds of outcomes. And I think that change is also, moving this. And we find that with with so much content being produced, even in low-end digital, we have emerging stars, who come out because they're doing something like we operate across cricket, mindfulness, and all. And we're creating, of course, while you create, AA, AAA quality content, you're also creating a lot of other generic content. And editing is a function, I think, that comes out of a lot of these guys, and we're seeing people graduate and go up into doing great things in the future. So also another good space, yeah. But anyway, I think Jack was saying something.
Great. I'm going to jump in here. We have a bunch of questions from the audience, and I want to make sure that people have an opportunity. So first, I'm going to go to Ani. If you just want to do a quick introduction and ask your question, that would be great. And then I'm going to follow by Meenakshi right after you, Ani.
Thank you. My name is Ani Agnihotri. I'm based in Atlanta, US for the last 30 years. My introduction to this, I work very closely in U.S. India corridor as a business owner in advanced technology, and I come from software background. In the past, I have taken about 10 trips to India, inviting companies from gaming and media, etc., to our part of the world in Atlanta, Georgia. And but most of the time, our impression has been that Indian companies are very lax. They don't follow schedule. Everything is last minute. We have had a couple of projects here where our teams here just got about 2 weeks notice and everybody's landing to start shooting. That's one perception which is repeatedly comes out. And the second observation is that we have to go beyond Bombay and Hollywood to evangelize this industry to the software level. It cannot be only in 2 cities or 2 places where this whole thing can be done. We need to go beyond to other cities, other places. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't get the latter half of your question, but let me turn it, first of all, to, I think Namit might be a good place to start since he's been doing this for a while. He's managing this team of 6,000 people in India, and we'll kind of go around to all our speakers after that. But
I think, see, what you're saying is not incorrect in the sense that there is a certain, as I said earlier, that there is a certain cultural and a structure of how things are done in India, and there is an expectation that things can be moving at a similar pace or a similar style. Simple things like 5-day weeks versus 7-day weeks in India. There are, in the business that you're in India, people are happy to work 16-hour days, 7 days a week on the production side of things, and it's not considered out of joint. Relative to, and then you make the switch to the West, and it's an 8-hour day and 5 days a week, unless you want to spend crazy amounts of money in overtime and other. So there's a lack of an appreciation or an education in that form and structure to start with, and that's why you will invariably find difficulties in when you try and bring people over. But there's a certain amount of learning and aptitudinal understanding that needs to happen. That being said, there's a lot of productions that do happen in the UK, and they happen very successfully. I think Indian productions in America have had it harder because it's been a slightly more differentiated production environment. Every country is kind of a bit different. The other point, again, what you're saying is that, connecting Hollywood and Bollywood, we only use the reference of Hollywood and Bollywood just as a way to try and signal the two, call it flag posts in America and India, as saying that these are the 2 places at least where there should be a working collaboration to begin. Because, the fact is, while that should spread across the rest of America and the rest of India, the fact is that even on the 2 points of origin, it's not really happened. That collaboration is still not happened and not played out. So neither has Hollywood rather successfully worked on the other side and believe that that's a viable alternative, and neither does Bollywood necessarily translate on the other side. And that, I think, is part of, unless you can get some of these anchors of businesses or people who've got like-minded aspirations to work together, it's only going to make it harder for the rest to follow in line. And that's where I feel.
I was about to say, and Ratiba, I mean, I think as you go about this pursuit in terms of the merger and whatnot, how do you how do you plan to address this, the situation that, in India, where supposedly known for being slower, not on time, or last minute, and that reputation that we may have in the creative world.
I feel like that reputation may be misrepresented to some regard, because I think that every sort of industry in every country has a different culture, right, and a different sort of style of working. So I think maybe Indian productions may be viewed sort of as a bit more lax, but I think that has its own organic process, right? And I feel that, say, what is so interesting about what we're trying to do and about the merger is that we're giving the opportunities to, say, Indian writers to go work in the West, give them a chance to sort of learn from local producers there, local writers there. Likewise, we're also giving the opportunity for Hollywood producers to come to India and understand how our process works, how we make films, and perhaps that cross-cultural collaboration of sort of teaching each other how to do things, I think, is what's really going to really benefit each respective industry and help it move forward. So I feel that it's not sort of something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to be a pretty organic process, and there's going to be there's going to be a teething process as well in the middle. I think that it's just something that will take time, really. It will take time for people to sort of experience the way one another operates and to learn from that.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a very simple formula to fix any issues that you have with time delays in India. Just discount it by 50%. It's simple. They're saying Tuesday, it's coming Wednesday. It's just it's cultural math.
The notion of time is very general, right? In India, we have the same word for yesterday and tomorrow. So that is something that is quite keen in our culture.
So, see, now jokes apart, this is the challenge which we face, and this transcends beyond this industry, where we, I'm sorry to say it, but, the India wants to compete with China, but are we ready? I mean, do we have that kind of discipline? Do we have that kind of sensitivity? And I've been watching this for 20 years. So, Ritma, how long do you want me to wait till this industry grows?
There's a multi-trillion-dollar industry in India which has built itself on doing half of the business, half of the costs of Google, of Microsoft, which work seamlessly, whether it's a Cognizant, whether it's an Infosys. I mean, these are listed companies which have proven themselves time and over. If you're talking about the entertainment industry, Namit has built a successful company with 8,000 people, which has proved itself. So when you're referring to the inefficiencies of India, we wouldn't be the fourth largest economy in the world if it were completely messed up all the time. So just throw that out there too.
That's fine.
I'm going to jump in.
You have a good point.
In here.
How many Indian productions are known here in the mainstream? Apart from the guys who are speaking today.
Ani, I'm going to jump in here, and I'm happy to connect you guys after the fact to follow up on this conversation. This cultural issue is something that we come across a lot, whether it's Shigar or timing, and there are sectors that deal with it in very different ways. I think the purpose here is how do we stimulate this sector to sort of evolve along whatever trajectory it might be that replicates something that looks closer to digital services over time. And I think that's really one of the key objectives that we have today and through our series going forward. So I really want to thank you, and we're happy to connect this offline, but there are others on the line that have a few questions as well. So I'm going to move over to Meenakshi Lekhi, and Meenakshi, while you unmute yourself, after that, I'm going to go to Babu, who's jumped in and out as well and has a couple questions. So Meenakshi, the microphone's yours, ma'am.
Hi, Meenakshi. Good to see you.
Hi, Megha. Hi. Fantastic discussion. It's a real revelation and thrilling to be part of it. I had a question for Jack, and this comes from my complete ignorance as a layperson about how digital platforms work. And in my lay way, I imagine that every time we use mostly digital platforms, they're busy grabbing our data, right? That's how they remain in the business. Our videos, our texts, our, generating big data and selling it off to the nearest thug. So, do you imagine that your, for the family footage editing and trailer story making stuff, do you imagine that there might be potential concerns from your clients that the digital platforms that you use might somehow, have their footage going off into the internet before they meant to release it, and this is private footage with their kids and wives and everything? And how would you address that for lay people like myself who have no clue how these things work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's always going to be that fear because of what Facebook and other big big companies do. However, they have to do that because they don't really have a business model in place, and that's how they monetize their company. We have a straightforward business model of it's more like Uber, where you're going to pay for a ride in a car or pay for a edit. So we don't need to sell your data, and we're not going to. But the idea is that people are becoming less private all the time, right? The younger generation, especially. You really aren't taking photos for the most part, or videos of anything on your vacation or anything in your, child's birthday party that you wouldn't have the intent of, maybe if this is the best shot of the day, I will post this to Instagram, right? So you're already filtering that in your mind of, this is for my friends. Maybe my friends will like this. You end up with 400 choices, right? And you pick one.
Yeah.
So that's where we come in to say, take those 400 things you wanted to show your friend, give it to an editor, and we'll put it into one piece. And it'll be something you want to show your friend, but it'll be with storytelling. It'll be well put together. And when you do it like that, it becomes a time capsule that you just tuck away and you go back in 10 years. I had the experience on Father's Day this past weekend of showing my sons, who are 11 and 14, videos from our last 10 years of our life.
Oh.
And I have it all because even before the company, I had started kind of experimenting, and they were blown away with the memories that they didn't even remember, right? So now I was creating their brain, their personality, their history, and it was amazing to have it. So I think every consumer is really going to want to start this digital history. And if we can scale, and I could use everyone's advice again, if we can scale to a big number, I think that it's going to be the new job. Like personal editing, I think will become an industry.
I think you could be the next monthly multi-billionaire with this idea.
I'm gonna turn to Babu Subramaniam. Babu, we've been trying to get you on back and forth, so the microphone is yours. Please give a quick introduction and ask your question or two.
Oh, hi everyone. Hope you guys can hear me. Good morning. This has been very insightful. I'll just give you a quick overview. I work in film and television. I'm originally from Bombay. I started my career some 40 years ago in Bombay, and then came to the U.S. back in the 70s. And then I went through the DGA training program, came through the ranks as an assistant director, and then started directing episodic television. And I had an experience recently. When I say recent, I'd say over the last 2 years, where I was approached to consult on a big Bollywood film that was going to be shot all over the world, and where I had to interface a lot with visual effects and stunts and various aspects of production. And so I went back and forth from LA to this company was Chennai based. And one of the major issues that I kind of like faced and confronted with was this business of oversight and accountability when it comes to production planning and execution. And it was like pulling teeth to get anything kind of accomplished. And I kept asking myself, why is this happening? Why is, they're all smart people, intelligent people, but when it comes to accountability, it's a major issue I saw. And then subsequently, I was approached by Netflix here in Los Angeles, as well as Amazon, to do some workshops for Netflix India and Amazon India in Mumbai on production planning and execution. And it was, and the only reason, they wanted to do this workshop was they were confronted
Babu,
with the same issue.
I think we understand, and the question, it sort of follows up on that previous question of how to make sure that things are organized and coordinated. I'm going to just turn it over to maybe Namit and Rajan. You guys have a lot of experience in this sort of crafted packaging. Has things changed in the recent past that might differ from what Babu's perception is, or is what he says a valid concern?
I think this is where I was trying to say earlier that what you've got is you've got a very existing ecosystem. Call it chaotic, call it disorganized, whatever it be. There's a way in which content gets made in every part of the world, in the way it gets made at a certain price and at a certain level. Now, everybody looks at the Western way of doing it, thinks about it and says it's way more expensive. It's more organized, but it's more expensive. The Indian way is more disorganized, but it's cheap, it's quick, it kind of gets to the same result at a certain level, albeit it's not in the same level of let's say calm and efficiency in which you would like it to be. So both these realities exist in the real world, and they are what they are. So I think bridging that is obviously the challenge and the opportunity, and that's fundamentally down to people like all of us, who recognize that there is a bridge to be built, and that's the bridge you got to build between the two sides. So I always look at that as that's the challenge, and that's what really for all of us here who are trying to work between the two different cultures and countries, that's our opportunity to make happen, to leverage our experience of both sides of the world. That's our job.
Amit, I think there are some areas where you don't see this happening, right? Because we've already crossed that bridge, right? And there are some, and in some where this gap exists. So I think it's also depending on, what one really wants to get done from India. And, at the end of the day, it's the price performance curve, right? I mean, you get things in the right mix at the right price, and then you figure things out. So I think it's right. It's got both. It's got some things. I think if you want that perfect solution, it's there. It's also sometimes, hiring people at the supervisory level who have had the experience of getting these kinds of things done and, getting those timelines. So I think mature companies don't really face some of that challenge.
Great, thank you. We have two final questions. If I can indulge the speakers to stay a few minutes afterwards, thank you. We're going to turn to Tanu Banerjee, and then I have one final question for the panelists, and then we can wrap. Tanu, you need to go off of mute, please, or I can ask your question. We see you. Let me just pull up your question orally. And
she's right here. Can you speak, Tanu?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. Hi. So, quick introduction. I'm a lawyer based out of India, and I'm actually been in the entertainment and media space for a while. And I've worked with a couple of production houses here, also platforms on both production and acquisition side. This whole discussion was very helpful to sort of get a insight into the business and the creative space than the legal space, which I typically deal with. Quickly, the question was that often a similar concept we see is developed very differently in India and in US, given perhaps the difference between the audience. Just from a business perspective, I want to understand what are the typical challenges that are faced to sort of have an equal creative approach in terms of production. Is it the challenge on the talent or budgets or locations, or perhaps the challenges with the Indian legal framework?
I think, Rajan, actually, you've dealt with a lot in this world, especially from a policy point of view. Do you have anything that you can share that you've worked on in the last few years on this front, and then we can kind of go around?
Yeah, I think you're right. There is a difference on the legal system, which you're probably more familiar right. with. And I think it comes back to what we were just addressing in the earlier question also, that at the end of the day, it is about getting the right complementarity of skill sets and capabilities that will get the best outcome, right? And I think there are some areas which work well in India, some outcomes that India will drive exceedingly well, especially when it comes to monetary outcomes, and some where there will be a gap, right? But I think increasingly we are finding that we're getting talent from from Europe, shooting in Bali, getting other aspects done in Sweden, and this becoming a success maybe in the US, right? So I think we're increasingly seeing the global mix of different pieces happening, pretty much like you would see in a manufacturing industry, where if you take an automobile, it's got parts made from 50 countries in the world, or some piece of that was done, right? And I think the technology is enabling that kind of complexity to exist and specialization to happen. So I think it's an interesting time, and we'll find different things kind of falling into place. But again, I think it's hard for one entity or to kind of bring in the best from everywhere. And I think that's where somewhere India sits well, especially we find with our Japanese partners and others, we become the hub for everything else that needs to integrate into from the world and work with them to create global products. So I think this is a trend that we are seeing quite extensively play out going ahead as well.
And it almost sounds like global supply chains that have been developed in other sectors, both digital and physical. The last question, and Meta, I didn't tell you this in advance. I'm going to turn you into a panelist now. So we're going to start with the ladies. One of the questions has to do with what are the top areas for U.S. India collaboration? What are the opportunities for the two countries to work together going forward? I'm going to ask each of the panelists to sort of, in a very few words, say where they think the greatest opportunities for the U.S. India relationship are. I'm going to start with Meta, ladies first, Ridhima, and then we'll go to the gentlemen. So Meta, to you.
Thank you. One of the things that Abhi brought up earlier, and I am familiar with what they're doing, is the fact that they're hiring a lot of creative talent in India to work on sort of global major projects. So for instance, they had to design a poster for Quibi, and they had a designer who's actually a friend of mine in Mumbai design this. And giving those creative opportunities to the talent that does exist in India is something that I think we should definitely explore. For instance, like Ridhima was talking about the writers, Rajan was talking about like the creative talent demand that we have in India. So my takeaway, one of my many takeaways from this morning, is that we should definitely, I know that coming to America is difficult in terms of getting the work visa and, different culture, et cetera, and maybe people just want to live in India. They don't have to move to the US to work on global projects. And so I think the thing I'm most excited about is giving an opportunity, and as Jack said, the democratization of editors, using editors from around the world to work on multiple projects. And so that's the thing that I'm most excited about as a creative person who trained at film school and has worked in both countries.
Awesome. Mela, you stole my answer. No, I'm just kidding. But we touched upon this earlier. I have to second that and agree with that. I think that creative collaboration all around, whether it's from directors to writers to producers or to gamers, I think it's about how for me, I think it's about how the creative industry sort of works with the technology industry and how those lines start to blur. I think that is what's super fascinating within both markets. And I think that could be really broad, whether it's content, whether it's gaming, whether it's platform distribution. I think I can speak just for us. From an Eros perspective, we're so pleased that, say, Eros now is the only sort of Indian company on Apple TV. I think that's pretty exciting. I think that's just an example of one of the collaborations that really, truly represent what we're trying to say is a global story here.
Jack, we want to go to you, Abhishek, Namit, and then Rajan, I'll give you the final word. So Jack, to you, please.
I'm very excited about actually, we talked about scaling, we talked about talent, we've talked about that, but I'm excited about what you're doing here this morning or this evening, this is a great idea to push forward the macro discussion. And I think we can give each other advice. And I think it's these executives and visionaries that we all can talk to and put together to help each other get these goals of collaboration, of working together as partners. You know, I think it's really smart, and I'm excited to be exposed to the executive talent and the experience and the vision of everyone around here. So thank
you. I think the question was basically what can U.S. India Business Council do to further help us collaborate?
What areas of collaboration we should be looking at going forward?
I think one particular, I mean, saying that let's connect creatives is broad and generic, which is great, and I'm with you. But there are subsegments of creatives which are underlooked. And so, for example, Medha and I know people in India who are some of the best graphic design or poster artists, or, you know, they do incredible work. So maybe get a slightly more filtered group of high-level, Hollywood savvy, English-speaking, American culture, sensitized Indian talent, and focus on that as a way to collaborate, because that exists and it's not come to the forefront till Jack and I started working with the big studios and started making trailers, and they were like, holy shit, this was done in India? And we were like, yep. So that.
So, you know, I think from my standpoint, you know, I think we've obviously over the last 12 years, 13 years, have been able to really connect across all the various streams of what I would call premium content production digitally through our global network of artists and collaboration. I think the real opportunity from my standpoint is to try and see how to take, frankly, Hollywood productions or physical productions into a place like India, which has so much talent on the actual production side. And, you know, America and American studios have, you know, scoured the earth and gone in every conceivable location in the world to tell their stories. And it feels to me like there's a massive opportunity that can be leveraged by enabling the two countries to play together, where you can bring big scale American productions to different parts of India, to use the topography of India, to use the talent crews of India, the cost efficiencies that India represents, to be able to produce and tell stories that again can now address a more, what I would call a unified global audience. With the likes of Netflix and Amazon, you're already seeing that happen. And Avengers is as big a sensation in America as it is in India. So you've got, you know, right now the real opportunity to take a very feasible and a real financially viable alternative of bringing the productions into India and really start to produce content that can then go across the world. And I think that's a massive opportunity that somehow the two countries that should have done that many, many decades ago have not done. And there's a certain opportunity today that I genuinely believe can really put a lot of sense of collaboration, and frankly, the credibility on both sides of the countries will significantly get enhanced on the back of that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rajan. I'm going to give you the last word.
Okay, thanks, Jay. But, you know, just to add on what everyone has said, I think US and India can, you know, serve the world entertainment industry. I don't have any doubt in that. I mean, we've had, you know, Swedish singers, you know, being, you know, productions being done out of India in multiple languages. Just within India, you know, we have tons of different things that are going on. But I think the US-India strong bond, you know, whether it's in co-production of things for the world, it's about bringing the rest of the world together and truly leveraging Indian talent and, you know, the frugal method of getting things done in India could be a game changer, you know, for the industry. And I also want to say that, you know, there is a lot happening in new age media and entertainment. And I think this is a precursor, Jay, to what we're going to do next, which is around esports. We founded India's largest esports company. And we've seen how, you know, that area and that aspect of connecting young people across, you know, the two geographies can create tremendous opportunity, both for people to change mindsets, because you game to earn a livelihood, a living, give recognition. I mean, Mountain Dew just put photographs of these gamers on that bottle, and those kids went and told their parents that, hey, I've become famous because I play games, right? I mean, that's a new story that's unfolding, for the world. And I think that's where the opportunity really lies between us, between US and India, to reimagine the future of young people using talent, using gaming, using all the areas that we've talked about today to see how we can build a much better relationship between our two countries in the next decade. So thanks. I'm going to stop.
Well, thank you, Rajan. I couldn't have summed it up better myself. Esports is going to be our next topic in the webinar series. I do want to thank everybody. I want to start with Meta. We could not have done this without you, with your capable idea setting and just a solid pulling together of such a wonderful panel here. If you'll have us again, we would love to have you moderate another one of these conversations. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Go Meta! Woohoo!
to our panelists, Ridhima, Avi, Rajan, Namit, and Jack. I have to say this was one of the most fun and fascinating and insightful webinars I've had in a really long time. It's a new, fresh topic, and really want to thank you for bringing new perspectives. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank our participants. We've had a tremendous interest in this. Thank you. We've been almost 2 hours now, and a lot of people have been engaging and asking really good questions. So thank you for everyone, and really appreciate your time. Do stay tuned. There will be follow-ups in our Media and Entertainment webinar series, How to Catch a Black Swan. And in the meantime, please everybody stay safe and sound. And we look forward to our next opportunity to raise these and other exciting issues on behalf of the U.S. India Business Council. So thank you and have a great day.
And on behalf of Jet Synthesis, thank you for joining us. This will, as Jay mentioned, continue. And please engage with us because I'm sure we could have talked for hours and hours as a group if we were in person. But since we're all in digital form, feel free to reach out.
Do you want the speakers to stay on, Medha? You mentioned that earlier. I don't know if that's you need.
Why don't we can catch up another time.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Okay. Very
Bye-bye.
good. Thank you, folks. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao, bye.